Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every human relationship when truth removes its disguise, when affection was taken for granted, when loyalty was misused, and when kindness was mistaken for weakness. Reality eventually steps into the room without knocking. The weight of lost love is not carried by the one who gave it sincerely. It is carried by the one who underestimated its value. This is not mysticism. It is emotional mathematics. Every action produces a reaction. Every decision creates a consequence. And every heart remembers how it was treated. Love given with sincerity creates emotional accountability in others because genuine affection is not merely an emotion. It is an investment of energy, time, attention, and intention. When a person offers real love, they are offering a part of their identity, their patience, and their emotional presence. This kind of love is not loud, not forceful, and not demanding, yet it carries a silent authority. It sets a standard without announcing one. People often misunderstand this quiet strength and assume that because it does not pressure or manipulate, it can be ignored without consequence. However, sincerity has a unique psychological effect. It plants a memory in the mind and an imprint on the conscience, even when the relationship ends or the connection fades. The memory of being loved authentically continues to exist like a mirror inside the other person's awareness. They may try to distract themselves, replace the connection, or deny its significance, but sincerity leaves evidence that cannot easily be erased. Emotional accountability does not mean guilt or punishment, it means recognition. It is the moment when an individual becomes aware that their actions had weight, that their responses mattered, and that their neglect or misuse of affection produced an internal imbalance. Human beings are wired to respond to authenticity. When someone receives consistent kindness, patience, and understanding, their subconscious begins to measure their own behavior against what they received. This comparison may not happen immediately. In many cases, it occurs later, often when the sincere presence is gone. Absence has a way of sharpening perception. The mind begins to replay conversations, gestures, and moments that once seemed ordinary. What was once taken for granted transforms into something valuable simply because it is no longer accessible. Sincere love also exposes emotional maturity. When a person is loved deeply, they are indirectly invited to grow. They are given a safe environment to communicate, to reflect, and to become better versions of themselves. If they reject or mishandle that opportunity, the emotional accountability they later feel is not created by the one who loved them, it is created by their own awareness. It is similar to being given a book filled with wisdom and choosing not to read it, only to realize later that the knowledge inside could have prevented many mistakes. The regret is not imposed, it is self-generated. This is why sincere love carries such influence. It does not demand transformation, yet it naturally encourages it. For the giver, understanding this principle is empowering. It shifts their mindset from seeking validation to recognizing inherent worth. When you love sincerely, your value is not determined by how the other person reacts in the moment. Their reaction may be influenced by fear, immaturity, or emotional unavailability. But those reactions do not diminish the purity of what was offered. In fact, sincerity protects the giver's peace because it eliminates internal doubt. There is clarity in knowing that you acted with integrity, that your intentions were clean, and that your presence was genuine. This clarity becomes a shield against self, blame, and unnecessary rumination. Furthermore, sincere love teaches boundaries. Many people believe sincerity means endless tolerance, but true sincerity includes self-respect. When you love authentically, you are not obligated to remain in spaces where your affection is exploited or dismissed. Emotional accountability works both ways. Just as the receiver eventually recognizes the value they lost, the giver recognizes the importance of protecting their emotional well-being. This realization is not bitterness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that love should elevate both individuals, not exhaust one while excusing the other. Over time, emotional accountability becomes a quiet teacher. It encourages introspection, humility, and personal growth. Some individuals will transform because of it, choosing to become more attentive and emotionally responsible in future relationships. Others may resist the lesson, but even resistance confirms the presence of awareness. The seed has been planted regardless of whether it is nurtured. Sincere love, therefore, holds a dual power. It liberates the giver through self-respect and confronts the receiver with self-reflection. It is not about winning or losing, it is about truth revealing itself naturally. When love is given sincerely, it never truly disappears. It evolves into wisdom for one person and accountability for the other, shaping both journeys in different but meaningful ways. The loss of genuine care often reveals a person's inner emptiness, because authentic love acts like a light inside a room that someone did not even realize was dark. When true affection is present, it quietly fills emotional gaps, softens insecurities, and provides reassurance without demanding applause. Many individuals become accustomed to this warmth and begin to assume it is ordinary, replaceable, or endlessly renewable. Yet genuine care is not an unlimited resource. It is an intentional investment of time, patience, and emotional energy. When that care disappears, the absence exposes spaces within the heart that were previously hidden by comfort. What once felt normal suddenly feels hollow, conversations lose depth, and achievements no longer bring the same satisfaction. This emptiness is not caused by the empath's departure. It is revealed by it. The empath did not create the void. They were unknowingly filling it. The realization can be unsettling because it forces a person to confront parts of themselves they avoided for years, insecurity masked as confidence, loneliness disguised as independence, and fear hidden beneath control. Genuine care often acts as emotional scaffolding, supporting a person's sense of worth and stability. When that scaffolding is removed, the structure must stand on its own foundation, and many discover that foundation was never strengthened. This moment becomes a turning point. Some individuals will deny the emptiness and seek distractions, temporary attention, or superficial relationships to silence the discomfort. Others, however, will recognize the emptiness as a signal for growth. They begin to understand that emotional fulfillment cannot be stolen from others. It must be cultivated within. The loss of genuine care, therefore, becomes an educational experience, not merely an emotional one. It teaches that appreciation should exist before absence, that respect must be practiced while love is present, and that emotional nourishment should never be mistaken for emotional dependency. In this sense, the empath's departure is not an act of cruelty, it is an act of truth. It reveals reality without accusation. It forces introspection without confrontation. It exposes emotional hunger that had been disguised by pride. The emptiness is not meant to destroy, it is meant to awaken. And those who choose to learn from it discover that genuine care was never meant to be consumed carelessly. It was meant to be honored, reciprocated, and understood as one of life's rarest treasures. True karma is the awakening of awareness, not punishment, because the most powerful consequences in life are not external events, but internal realizations. Many people imagine karma as a force that strikes dramatically, bringing visible loss or public embarrassment. Yet the most transformative form of karma is subtle. It arrives quietly in the form of understanding, clarity, and recognition of one's own behavior. Awareness does not shout, it whispers until it can no longer be ignored. When a person becomes aware of how their actions affected another human being, they experience a weight that no external penalty can replicate. This weight is not imposed by society or fate, it is generated by conscience. Awareness forces reflection, and reflection leads to accountability. It is easy to dismiss criticism from others, but it is difficult to escape the voice within that says, "You knew better." This internal awakening becomes the real turning point because it cannot be outrun. Punishment can be resisted, argued against, or forgotten over time, but awareness lingers. It revisits memories, replays conversations, and re-examines choices until understanding forms. This process is uncomfortable, yet it is also deeply educational. It teaches empathy where there was indifference, responsibility where there was denial, and humility where there was arrogance. True karma does not aim to harm, it aims to reveal. It exposes patterns that were once justified and behaviors that were once normalized. The awakening of awareness is like turning on a light in a room filled with scattered objects. Suddenly everything is visible, including the mess that was previously ignored. Some individuals will attempt to switch the light off, returning to old habits and familiar excuses. Others will begin to organize the room, acknowledging mistakes and making intentional changes. The beauty of awareness is that it offers choice. It does not force transformation, but it makes transformation possible. It shows that consequences are not always meant to be suffered, they are meant to be understood. When awareness emerges, a person no longer views relationships as opportunities for control or validation, but as responsibilities requiring respect and honesty. This realization is the purest form of karma because it alters future behavior, not just present emotion. It replaces ignorance with wisdom and impulsiveness with intention. In the end, the awakening of awareness becomes a gift disguised as discomfort. It is the moment when a person stops blaming circumstances and begins examining character. It is the silent teacher that reshapes decisions long after the initial situation has passed. And unlike punishment, which fades with time, awareness has the power to permanently redirect the course of a person's life toward maturity, compassion, and genuine understanding. Love given with sincerity carries an invisible weight because it is rooted in intention rather than performance. When someone loves sincerely, they are not negotiating for attention, applause, or advantage. They are investing emotional energy without calculating immediate return. This type of love is powerful because it creates emotional accountability in the other person, even if that person pretends not to notice it at the time. Human psychology does not easily discard genuine experiences. A person may ignore kindness, overlook loyalty, or even exploit compassion, but deep within the mind, an imprint is formed. That imprint becomes a quiet reminder of what was offered freely and what was mishandled carelessly. Sincere love does not beg to be recognized, it simply exists with dignity. When it is eventually withdrawn, the absence feels disproportionate because the receiver unconsciously relied on it more than they admitted. Emotional accountability is not about guilt, it is about awareness. The mind naturally compares past warmth with present emptiness, and this comparison often becomes the beginning of reflection. The one who loved sincerely walks away lighter because they acted in alignment with their values. The one who received that love, however, may begin to feel the emotional debt of unappreciated care. This is not punishment, it is the natural psychological consequence of realizing that something valuable was treated as ordinary. In educational terms, sincerity functions like a lesson written in permanent ink. It cannot be erased, only understood later. The loss of genuine care often exposes an individual's inner emptiness because authentic connection has a way of filling emotional spaces that people do not realize are vacant. Many individuals move through life surrounded by distractions, achievements, and social circles, yet still carry an internal void. Genuine care temporarily masks this emptiness by providing emotional reassurance, validation, and a sense of belonging. When that care disappears, the distractions remain, but the emotional nourishment is gone. Suddenly, activities that once felt satisfying become hollow, and relationships that seemed exciting begin to lack depth. This is not because the world has changed, but because the emotional support that quietly sustained their confidence has been removed. Inner emptiness is not always visible. It often hides behind pride, humor, or business. However, the loss of someone who offered authentic understanding acts like a spotlight, illuminating areas of insecurity and unmet emotional needs. In educational growth, this moment can become transformative if the individual chooses introspection rather than denial. Instead of blaming circumstances or seeking immediate replacements, self-examination allows them to ask meaningful questions about their behavior, communication, and emotional maturity. The absence of genuine care reveals whether a person relied on external affection to define their worth or whether they developed internal stability. Those who refuse to reflect may attempt to fill the void with superficial connections, but superficial substitutes rarely satisfy deep emotional needs. Those who accept the lesson, however, begin to build emotional independence, empathy, and self-awareness. In this sense, emptiness is not merely a deficiency, it is an invitation to growth. It teaches that relationships should enhance a person's life, not compensate for a lack of self-understanding. Emotional consequences are natural results of choices, not acts of revenge or cosmic punishment. Every decision carries psychological and relational outcomes, just as every academic action carries academic results. When a person repeatedly dismisses feelings, avoids accountability, or manipulates trust, the emotional consequences do not arrive dramatically, they accumulate quietly. Over time, these accumulated effects manifest as loneliness, regret, or dissatisfaction. This process is not mystical, it is behavioral cause and effect. Just as consistent study leads to knowledge and neglect leads to confusion, emotional behaviors shape relational outcomes. Understanding this principle removes the illusion that consequences are unfair or unexpected. Instead, they become predictable extensions of repeated actions. Educational awareness emphasizes responsibility rather than blame. When individuals recognize that their emotional environment is influenced by their communication style, empathy level, and integrity, they gain control over their future relationships. Viewing consequences as revenge encourages defensiveness, while viewing them as natural outcomes encourages growth. The empath who steps away is not delivering punishment, they are simply choosing self-respect. The resulting emotional impact on the other person is not orchestrated, it is self-generated through prior choices. This understanding empowers both sides. One learns that walking away from disrespect is not cruelty, but self-preservation, while the other learns that consistent disregard eventually leads to isolation. Emotional consequences function like a mirror reflecting accumulated behavior. They do not exaggerate or minimize, they reveal. When individuals accept this principle, they shift from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to asking, "What patterns led me here?" That shift marks the beginning of emotional intelligence. Instead of fearing consequences, they start shaping their decisions with awareness, knowing that every interaction plants a seed whose harvest will inevitably arrive. When a person who constantly demanded attention finally faces the absence of someone who once gave it freely, they begin to encounter a reality they tried to avoid for a long time: emotional accountability. Genuine love is not just affection, it is an investment of time, patience, understanding, and emotional safety. When someone receives this repeatedly without gratitude or responsibility, they slowly build an illusion that such love is ordinary and endlessly replaceable. But life has a way of correcting illusions. The moment that love is withdrawn, the emotional debt becomes visible. It is not a financial debt, nor is it something written on paper, but it is deeply felt within the conscience. The mind begins to replay memories, conversations, and missed opportunities. This is not magic or destiny at work. It is the natural psychological response of realizing one mishandled something rare. Emotional accountability is powerful because it forces a person to confront their own actions without distraction. There is no one left to blame, no argument to win, and no performance to maintain. The silence left behind becomes a courtroom where truth testifies against excuses. In this process, many people experience discomfort, restlessness, and even regret, not because someone cursed them, but because sincerity once surrounded them, and they failed to recognize its value. The loss of genuine care often exposes an inner emptiness that had been hidden by constant validation. When someone is surrounded by attention, admiration, or emotional support, they can easily mistake that environment for personal strength. They begin to believe they are fulfilled, admired, and emotionally secure, when in reality they are being supported by the energy of others. Once that support disappears, a void becomes noticeable. This emptiness is not created by the one who left. It was always there, merely covered by noise and distraction. Genuine care functions like emotional nourishment. Without it, the personality that once appeared confident may start to feel uncertain, anxious, or dissatisfied. This moment is crucial because it offers two paths: denial or growth. Denial leads to searching for quick replacements, superficial connections, or temporary distractions that never truly satisfy. Growth, however, begins with self-reflection and personal responsibility. When someone chooses growth, they start to understand that external admiration cannot replace internal stability. They learn that real fulfillment is built through character, empathy, and self-awareness rather than control or attention. The loss of genuine care, painful as it may be, becomes an educational experience that reveals emotional weaknesses and offers an opportunity to develop true strength. Emotional consequences are not acts of revenge delivered by fate. They are natural outcomes of repeated decisions. Every interaction, every dismissal of kindness, and every misuse of trust plants a seed in the mind and heart. Over time, these seeds grow into habits, and habits grow into realities. When a person repeatedly ignores sincerity, they condition themselves to overlook meaningful relationships. Eventually, when they desire depth or loyalty, they struggle to find it because their past behavior shaped their present environment. This is not punishment, it is cause and effect operating on an emotional level. Just as physical actions produce physical reactions, emotional behaviors generate emotional results. Understanding this principle removes the idea of victimhood and replaces it with responsibility. It teaches that every individual participates in creating their relational experiences. When someone feels the weight of lost love, they are experiencing the echo of their own decisions. This realization can be uncomfortable, but it is also empowering because it proves change is possible. If actions created the consequence, new actions can create a new outcome. Emotional maturity begins when a person stops asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts asking, "What did my behavior contribute to this situation?" That shift transforms pain into education and regret into wisdom. Empaths, on the other hand, do not lose their power when they walk away, they reclaim it. Many compassionate individuals mistakenly believe endurance equals strength. They tolerate disrespect, emotional neglect, or imbalance because they value harmony and hope for change. However, true strength is not measured by how much pain one can endure, but by how clearly one can recognize their worth. Walking away is not an act of defeat, it is an act of self-recognition. It is the moment a person decides their emotional energy deserves respect and reciprocity. When an empath leaves, they are not abandoning love, they are repositioning it toward themselves. This shift creates personal growth, increased confidence, and emotional clarity. They begin to understand that compassion must include self-compassion, and kindness must never exclude personal boundaries. Reclaiming power does not involve anger or revenge. It involves peace and self-leadership. The empath discovers that their ability to love deeply is not a weakness but a rare strength that should be shared wisely. In doing so, they rise above patterns that once drained them and step into relationships that honor their value. Their silence becomes dignity, their distance becomes healing, and their departure becomes a declaration that their worth is not negotiable. Love that is given with sincerity always leaves an imprint. Genuine affection is not a small emotional gesture. It is an investment of time, energy, patience, and vulnerability. When someone receives this level of care but fails to honor it, they may not immediately understand its worth. However, sincerity has a unique quality. It lingers in memory. Long after conversations end and presence fades, the emotional imprint remains. This is why authentic love carries emotional accountability. A person who once benefited from deep understanding and consistent support eventually confronts the absence of those comforts. They begin to realize that not every connection offers safety, and not every person will tolerate neglect. Sincere love becomes a silent teacher that continues educating even after the relationship ends. The loss of genuine care often exposes the inner emptiness of the one who misused it. When attention and admiration disappear, distractions can no longer hide emotional gaps. Many individuals fill their lives with noise, constant validation, social attention, or superficial connections. But when authentic care leaves, silence reveals what noise once covered. This emptiness is not punishment, it is awareness. It is the realization that admiration is not the same as understanding, and attention is not the same as loyalty. Genuine care cannot be replaced by quantity because its value lies in quality. The absence of it forces a person to confront themselves without filters, without applause, and without illusion. In that confrontation, they either grow or continue running from self-reflection. Emotional consequences are not acts of revenge, they are natural outcomes of choices. Just as physical actions produce physical results, emotional behaviors produce emotional reactions. When someone consistently dismisses, manipulates, or undervalues another person, they are unknowingly shaping their future emotional reality. Consequences are not delivered by fate with anger, they are delivered by life with accuracy. This understanding shifts the perspective from blame to responsibility. Instead of asking why something happened, one begins to ask what choices led to it. Emotional maturity begins when individuals recognize that relationships are ecosystems. What you plant is what eventually grows. Respect planted yields trust. Disrespect planted yields distance. These outcomes are not mystical, they are logical extensions of behavior. When an empath chooses to walk away, they are not surrendering. They are reclaiming ownership of their emotional world. Walking away is often misunderstood as weakness because society frequently glorifies endurance over wisdom. Yet endurance without respect is self-neglect. The empath who leaves does not lose their compassion, they redirect it toward themselves. They stop begging to be understood and start understanding their own needs. This transition is powerful because it transforms pain into awareness. Instead of asking, "Why was I not valued?" the empath begins asking, "Why did I stay where I was not valued?" That question is the beginning of empowerment. It shifts focus from external validation to internal clarity. Reclaiming power is not about controlling others. It is about controlling personal boundaries, decisions, and emotional investments. Silence then becomes a mirror rather than a weapon. Silence is often misinterpreted as avoidance, but in reality, it can be one of the strongest forms of communication. When words are removed, reflection increases. Silence removes distractions and forces both individuals to face their thoughts without interruption. For the one who lost genuine love, silence becomes heavy because it allows memories to speak louder than conversations ever did. For the empath, silence becomes healing because it creates space for self-reconnection. It is within this quiet that lessons settle deeply. Silence does not chase, argue, or demand recognition. It simply stands firm and allows truth to surface. In this stillness, awareness grows naturally. The mirror of silence shows each person who they truly are. One sees wisdom gained, the other sees opportunities lost. And in that reflection lies the most powerful education of all, understanding that the greatest transformation begins not with noise, but with clarity. Regret grows in the human heart when realization arrives late, and realization often arrives in silence. When a person finally understands the value of a connection they once treated casually, the emotional impact can be heavier than any spoken confrontation. Regret is not loud in the beginning. It starts as a whisper, a subtle awareness that something meaningful is missing. At first, the individual may attempt to replace what was lost with distractions, new relationships, or external achievements. Yet genuine emotional bonds are not interchangeable objects. They are experiences built through time, patience, and authenticity. When someone loses a connection that carried sincerity, understanding, and emotional safety, they do not simply lose a person, they lose a reflection of their own potential for growth. The absence becomes a teacher, revealing lessons that pride once concealed. Human psychology shows that appreciation often follows loss rather than presence. While something is available, the mind becomes comfortable and assumes permanence. Comfort slowly turns into complacency, and complacency creates blindness. The individual stops nurturing what once felt special, believing it will always remain. However, when that presence disappears, perception sharpens. Memories begin to replay with greater clarity than reality ever had. Conversations once ignored become meaningful. Gestures once overlooked become priceless, and patience once taken for granted becomes irreplaceable. Regret grows because the mind now understands what the heart failed to acknowledge in time. This is not merely emotional pain, it is the awakening of awareness. Awareness can be uncomfortable because it forces accountability, and accountability demands honesty with oneself. The inability to replace authentic connection intensifies this regret. Many relationships can be formed, but very few provide emotional depth. Surface interactions may offer temporary satisfaction, but they cannot substitute the calm that genuine understanding brings. The person who lost true connection begins to notice a pattern. New faces appear, yet the emotional resonance feels shallow. Conversations lack substance, and attention feels transactional rather than sincere. This realization does not occur instantly. It grows gradually, like a shadow stretching longer as the sun sets. Each attempt to fill the void only highlights the uniqueness of what was lost. The individual begins to confront a truth they once avoided. Authenticity cannot be duplicated, and emotional safety cannot be manufactured on demand. Regret also carries a psychological weight because it is tied to personal responsibility. When someone understands that their own behavior contributed to the loss, the emotional burden becomes deeper. It is easier to blame circumstances than to examine character. Yet true regret emerges when excuses no longer provide comfort. The mind starts asking difficult questions. Why did I dismiss what was genuine? Why did I prioritize ego over empathy? Why did I assume loyalty would never end? These questions are not punishments, they are invitations to maturity. Growth begins the moment a person stops defending their past actions and starts learning from them. However, growth requires humility, and humility often arrives only after regret has already taken root. Time plays a crucial role in amplifying this feeling. Immediately after a separation, distractions may reduce the emotional impact. Social activities, work, or entertainment can temporarily silence reflection. But time removes distractions one by one, leaving the individual alone with their thoughts. In quiet moments, late nights, empty mornings, or reflective pauses, the mind revisits what once felt ordinary. Emotional memory becomes vivid, not because the past was perfect, but because its value is now understood. The realization that appreciation came too late creates a sense of irreversible loss. This is where regret reaches its peak, the understanding that opportunities are not guaranteed to return simply because they are now valued. Yet regret, despite its pain, holds transformative potential. It can either trap a person in bitterness or guide them towards self-improvement. The weight of lost love becomes meaningful when it inspires change in character, communication, and emotional awareness. If the individual chooses introspection over denial, regret becomes a powerful educator. It teaches patience, empathy, gratitude, and responsibility. It reveals that relationships require maintenance, not assumption. It demonstrates that sincerity should be protected, not exploited. While regret cannot reverse the past, it can reshape the future. The emotional burden becomes lighter when it evolves into wisdom rather than self-pity. Ultimately, the growth of regret is not merely about missing a person. It is about confronting the consequences of undervaluing authenticity. The heart learns what the ego once ignored. The mind recognizes that emotional connections are not conveniences but privileges. And the soul begins to understand that genuine relationships are rare gifts, not guaranteed resources. When regret transforms into awareness, it ceases to be a source of suffering and becomes a foundation for maturity. The individual who accepts this lesson does not simply mourn what was lost. They become capable of honoring what they may receive in the future. The moment a person realizes they have lost genuine love is often the first time they truly confront themselves without distraction. When affection was present, it served as emotional shelter, a quiet reassurance that someone cared deeply regardless of flaws. But once that shelter disappears, the emotional climate changes. The individual who once dismissed sincerity begins to feel an unfamiliar heaviness, not because someone cursed them, but because they can no longer escape the reflection of their own choices. This realization does not arrive with noise, it arrives with silence. And silence has a way of revealing truths that arguments never could. In that stillness, memories replay with clarity, and the mind starts asking questions the ego once refused to entertain. There is a powerful emotional law at work in human relationships. People rarely understand the value of something while they possess it effortlessly. Appreciation often awakens only after loss. When someone loses authentic care, they do not simply miss a person. They miss the emotional stability, the patience, the listening ear, and the unconditional presence that came with that person. The emptiness that follows is not merely loneliness. It is the absence of emotional nourishment they once received without earning. This emptiness becomes a teacher, showing them that admiration and control can never replace sincerity and understanding. It is an education that no book can offer and no lecture can fully explain, because it is learned through feeling rather than hearing. For the empath, the departure from such a relationship marks the beginning of self-reclamation. Walking away is not a sign of defeat, it is evidence of awakening. Many empathetic individuals believe their compassion was wasted, but compassion is never wasted, it is refined. Through painful experiences, they learn the importance of boundaries, the necessity of self-respect, and the difference between loving someone and losing themselves for someone. This transformation is subtle but profound. They begin to understand that their kindness was never the problem. The problem was allowing their kindness to exist without protection. The moment they shift from seeking validation to honoring their own worth, their healing accelerates. They stop chasing explanations and start embracing clarity. Silence plays an essential role in this emotional evolution. When communication stops, there is no longer a stage for manipulation or justification. Silence removes the distractions that once covered insecurity and forces introspection. For the one who misused affection, silence becomes a mirror reflecting unresolved issues and unacknowledged fears. For the empath, silence becomes a sanctuary where they can hear their own thoughts again. In this quiet space, both individuals face different journeys. One toward awareness of consequences, the other toward rediscovery of identity. Silence, therefore, is not weakness or avoidance. It is a powerful form of emotional intelligence that allows truth to surface naturally. Regret emerges when replacement fails. Many people assume they can easily substitute one connection for another, only to discover that authenticity cannot be duplicated. Superficial attention may fill time, but it cannot fill emotional depth. When someone tries to replace genuine love with admiration or distraction, they eventually confront dissatisfaction. This dissatisfaction is not caused by the absence of a specific person alone. It is caused by the absence of sincerity they once experienced. The realization that authenticity is rare often arrives too late, but its lesson is undeniable. It teaches that emotional connections are not interchangeable objects. They are unique experiences shaped by trust, vulnerability, and mutual respect. Meanwhile, the empath's growth becomes evident in their changing perspective. They begin to value peace over validation, clarity over confusion, and purpose over attachment. They no longer measure their worth by how much they are needed, but by how aligned they are with their own principles. This shift transforms their emotional landscape. They become less reactive and more reflective, less dependent and more self-assured. Their compassion remains, but it becomes guided by wisdom rather than impulse. This evolution is not about becoming cold, it is about becoming balanced. They learn that love given freely should also be protected wisely. What many call karma is in reality awareness unfolding over time. It is not an external force delivering punishment, it is an internal awakening revealing truth. When someone feels the weight of the love they lost, they are experiencing the natural result of their behavior meeting reality. Awareness can be uncomfortable, but it is also the gateway to growth. Some individuals will use this awareness to change and mature, while others may resist and repeat patterns. Regardless of the response, the lesson remains present. Emotional consequences are not designed to destroy a person, they are designed to educate them. In the end, the greatest transformation occurs not when someone else realizes your value, but when you realize it yourself. Self-recognition liberates a person from seeking approval in places where respect is absent. It empowers them to walk away from environments that diminish their spirit and towards spaces that nurture their growth. The true victory is not witnessing regret in another's eyes. It is feeling confidence in your own heart. When a person understands their worth, They stop negotiating their dignity and start living with intention. That awareness becomes their strength, their peace, and their freedom, a freedom that no loss can take away and no regret can diminish. Love that is given with sincerity carries an invisible weight because it is rooted in intention rather than performance. When someone offers patience, understanding, encouragement, and emotional safety without manipulation, they are investing a part of their inner world into another person. This kind of love is not loud, but it is powerful because it is consistent. People often overlook consistent goodness because it does not demand attention, yet its absence is deeply felt. The emotional accountability created by sincere love does not come from control or pressure, it comes from contrast. Once that warmth is removed, the emotional climate changes, and the person who once benefited from it begins to understand that genuine affection was never ordinary. It was a privilege they failed to recognize. The loss of genuine care exposes inner emptiness because authentic love often fills emotional gaps that a person may not even know they have. When someone who truly listens, supports, and believes in another person steps away, the silence that follows reveals what was previously hidden. Distractions, ego, and pride can temporarily mask loneliness, but they cannot permanently replace emotional nourishment. When the empath leaves, the individual who once dismissed their value is left with the echo of conversations, the memory of reassurance, and the absence of unconditional presence. This emptiness is not caused by the empath's departure, it is revealed by it. The space was always there, but sincere love had been covering it like light covers shadows. Emotional consequences are not acts of revenge, they are natural results of human behavior. Just as physical actions create physical outcomes, emotional actions produce emotional reactions. When someone repeatedly dismisses kindness, manipulates trust, or undervalues loyalty, the eventual outcome is not mystical or supernatural. It is psychological and relational. The human mind is wired to respond to loss and reflection. Regret is not punishment. It is awareness arriving late. This principle teaches that people are not harmed by karma in the sense of external force. They are educated by the outcomes of their own decisions. Understanding this removes bitterness and replaces it with clarity, allowing individuals to focus on growth rather than retaliation. Empaths do not lose their power when they walk away. They reclaim it because their strength was never tied to another person's approval. The misconception that leaving equals defeat comes from emotional conditioning that confuses endurance with value. In reality, walking away from disrespect is an act of self-recognition. It is the moment a person chooses internal peace over external validation. Power is not proven by how much pain someone can tolerate. It is proven by how clearly they can identify what they deserve. When the empath chooses distance, they are not abandoning love. They are redefining it. They are teaching themselves that compassion must include self-compassion, and that boundaries are not barriers to connection, but filters for healthy relationships. Silence becomes a mirror because it removes distraction and forces introspection. Words can be argued against, emotions can be denied, and conflicts can be deflected, but silence cannot be negotiated with. It stands firm and invites reflection. When the empath stops explaining, pleading, or defending, the other person is left with their own thoughts. In that quiet environment, memories resurface and awareness grows. Silence does not attack, it reveals. It creates the psychological space where denial weakens and truth strengthens. This mirror effect is powerful because it shifts responsibility inward rather than outward, making it impossible to blame others for feelings that originate from one's own realization. Regret grows when authentic connection proves irreplaceable. Superficial interactions can be found easily, but depth requires vulnerability, patience, and emotional maturity. When someone loses a connection that offered genuine understanding, they often attempt to replicate it through new relationships, achievements, or distractions. However, authenticity cannot be duplicated through quantity, it is built through quality. The realization that something rare was mishandled creates a unique form of regret, one that is not about loneliness alone, but about missed opportunity. This regret becomes a teacher, reminding individuals that true connection is not guaranteed and should never be taken lightly. Healing for the empath begins the moment they stop seeking validation from those who fail to appreciate them. Validation that depends on another person's recognition is fragile because it can be withdrawn at any time. True healing occurs when self-worth becomes internal rather than external. This shift transforms emotional dependency into emotional independence. The empath learns that their kindness, empathy, and understanding are not flaws that need approval but strengths that require protection. As this realization deepens, confidence grows naturally. The need to prove value fades, replaced by a quiet certainty that does not demand applause or reassurance. This is emotional evolution, the transition from seeking acceptance to embodying self-respect. True karma is the awakening of awareness, not punishment or revenge. It is the moment a person clearly sees the connection between their actions and their outcomes. This awareness can be uncomfortable, but it is also transformative because it offers the opportunity for change. Punishment may create fear, but awareness creates growth. When someone recognizes how they contributed to their own loss, they gain the power to evolve beyond destructive patterns. Likewise, the empath's realization of their own worth is also karma in motion, a positive awakening that leads to healthier decisions and stronger boundaries. In this sense, karma is not an external force deciding fate. It is an internal light revealing truth, guiding both individuals toward different but necessary lessons. In the end, the greatest victory is not watching someone realize your worth. The greatest victory is realizing it yourself first. When you understand your value, you stop negotiating your dignity. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop chasing recognition. And in that moment, you rise, not above a person, but above a pattern. That is the true lesson. That is the true karma. And that is the true freedom.